Sarah, you need to see this, double quotes. My photographer's voice trembled through the phone, and I knew something was terribly wrong. It was 3 weeks after my perfect wedding day. Michael and I had just returned from our honeymoon in Tuscany, still glowing with that newlywed happiness that makes everything seem possible. The photographer Marcus had called to say our wedding album was ready for pickup. I was thrilled. I'd been dreaming of reliving those magical moments through his lens. But when I arrived at his studio that Tuesday afternoon, Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually pristine workspace was cluttered with contact sheets and magnifying glasses. The wedding album sat closed on his desk like a forbidden book. "I need to ask you something before you look at these," he said, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the album. "Do you know everyone who attended your wedding? Every single person?" The question struck me as odd. Of course, I knew everyone. We'd kept the guest list intimate, just 75 of our closest family and friends. Michael and I had personally invited each person. We'd agonized over the seating chart, making sure every face would be familiar and beloved. "Yes, why would you ask that?" I replied, but something in his expression made my stomach tighten. Marcus opened the album to a page near the middle, photos from the reception, moments I remembered as pure joy. The images were stunning, Michael and me laughing at our sweetheart table, my father's emotional speech, my bridesmaids dancing with abandon. But Marcus wasn't showing me these beautiful memories. His finger pointed to the background of one particular shot. "Look carefully at this photo," he whispered. "Tell me if you recognize the man standing behind your maid of honor." I leaned closer, squinting at the image. The reception hall looked exactly as I remembered: warm amber lighting, flowing white drapes, tables adorned with the peonies I'd carefully selected. My maid of honor, Jessica, was captured mid-laugh, her champagne glass raised in celebration. But there, just over her left shoulder, stood a figure I'd never seen before. He was an older man, perhaps in his 70s, wearing a dark suit that seemed oddly formal even for a wedding. His face was gaunt, almost skeletal, with deep-set eyes that seemed to stare directly into the camera. What disturbed me most wasn't his appearance. It was that I had absolutely no memory of seeing him at my wedding. I don't know who that is," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe he was someone's plus one? A relative I haven't met?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "Sarah, I've been doing wedding photography for 15 years. I know how to spot a guest versus—" He paused, struggling with his words. "This man appears in 17 different photos from your wedding. 17. And in every single one, he's looking directly at the camera. Not at you, not at Michael, not at the celebration. At me. At my lens." The room suddenly felt cold despite the warm October afternoon. I found myself studying the mysterious figure more intently, and the longer I stared, the more unsettled I became. There was something wrong about the way he stood. Too still, too perfectly positioned, as if he'd been waiting for each shot. "Show me the other photos," I heard myself say, though every instinct screamed against it. Have you ever found something in a photo that shouldn't have been there? Something that made you question your own memory? Marcus turned the pages with the reluctance of someone handling evidence at a crime scene. Each turn revealed another impossibility, another moment where this stranger had somehow positioned himself perfectly within the frame of my most precious memories. "Here," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "This was during your first dance. The photo should have been romantic. Michael and me swaying together to At Last by Etta James, lost in each other's eyes as we'd dreamed of for months. The soft lighting created a golden halo around us, and I could almost hear the music again. But there he was, standing at the edge of the dance floor, his face turned toward the camera with that same unsettling stare. I remember this moment perfectly," I said, my hands beginning to shake. "There were only a few people on the dance floor with us. My parents, Michael's parents, and maybe 3 other couples. This man, he wasn't there. I would have seen him." Marcus nodded grimly. "And here, during the cake cutting," another turn of the page revealed what should have been a playful moment. Michael and me feeding each other cake, both of us laughing as frosting smudged on our lips. The guests formed a semicircle around us, everyone smiling and applauding. Everyone except him. The mysterious man stood in the background, partially obscured by my cousin David, but clearly visible. His expression remained unchanged, that hollow, penetrating stare that seemed to look beyond the camera, beyond the celebration, into something else entirely. "The timestamp on this photo is 9:47 p.m., Marcus continued, his finger tracing the bottom of the image. "Your reception started at 6. He's been there for hours, Sarah. How did no one notice him? How did no one speak to him or wonder who he was?" I tried to think back to that evening, searching my memory for any recollection of the stranger. The reception had been a blur of congratulations, dancing, and champagne toasts. But surely someone would have mentioned an unknown guest. My mother had been meticulous about the seating arrangements. My father had personally greeted everyone who walked through the door. and Michael's family knew every invited guest by name. Maybe he was with the venue staff? I suggested weakly, grasping for any logical explanation. Or one of the vendors? Marcus shook his head. I coordinated with all the vendors that day. The catering staff wore black uniforms with the restaurant's logo, the musicians had their own designated area, the florist left before the reception even began. This man doesn't fit any of those categories. He turned another page and my breath caught in my throat. The photo showed the moment when Michael's grandfather had given his speech, a touching tribute to love and family that had left half the reception in tears. I remembered standing beside Michael, clutching his hand as his grandfather spoke about the importance of honoring those who came before us. But in this image, the mysterious man stood directly behind Michael's grandfather, his face visible over the elderly man's shoulder. The contrast was striking. Michael's grandfather, warm and animated in his storytelling, and behind him, this cold, motionless figure who seemed to drain the life from the scene. This is impossible, I whispered, staring at the photo. Grandpa Robert was standing at the head table. There wasn't room for anyone to stand behind him like that. The wall was right there. Marcus pulled out a floor plan of the reception venue, something he always requested from wedding planners to help plan his shots. He placed it beside the photo, and my heart sank. He was right. The positioning was impossible. The man appeared to be standing in a space that simply didn't exist. Sarah, Marcus said gently, I need to show you something else. Something that made me call you instead of just delivering the album like usual. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a contact sheet, dozens of small thumbnail images from the reception. With a red pen, he had circled 17 different photos, creating a timeline of appearances that spanned the entire evening. 6:23 p.m. He's visible in the background during cocktail hour. 7:15 p.m. to partially hidden behind the flower arrangements during dinner. 8:30 p.m. standing near the exit during your mother's speech. Every major moment of your wedding, Sarah. He was there for every single one. As I studied the contact sheet, a chill ran down my spine. The man's position changed throughout the evening, but his expression never did. In every single image, whether he was clearly visible or barely noticeable in the background, his face was turned toward the camera with that same haunting stare. It's like he was following your lens, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Like he knew exactly where you'd be shooting from. Marcus nodded, his face pale. That's what scares me most. In 15 years of wedding photography, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if he was there specifically to be photographed, but invisible to everyone else. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table with the wedding album spread before me like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Michael was working late, a blessing, really, because I didn't know how to explain what I'd discovered without sounding like I was losing my mind. I'd made a list of everyone who attended our wedding, methodically going through our guest book, the RSVPs, even the thank you card list I'd been working on. 75 names, all accounted for, all people I could identify and remember seeing that day. The mysterious man wasn't among them. My phone rang, startling me from my obsessive examination of the photos. It was Jessica, my maid of honor, calling from her apartment in the city. Hey, bride, how was the honeymoon? I haven't heard from you since you got back. Her cheerful voice felt like a lifeline to normalcy. Jess, I need to ask you something strange, I said, turning to the page where she appeared, laughing with her champagne glass raised. Do you remember seeing anyone at the wedding that you didn't recognize? Any older man, maybe in his 70s, dark suit? There was a pause. Sarah, are you okay? You sound weird. Please, just think. During the reception, did you notice anyone who seemed out of place? Anyone who might have been standing near you during the toasts? I could hear her thinking, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of concern. Honestly, no. I mean, there were a few people on Michael's side I hadn't met before, but his mom introduced me to everyone. Why are you asking? Hesitated, then decided to be direct. There's a man in our wedding photos. Multiple photos. And no one seems to know who he is. What do you mean, no one knows? Didn't you invite him? That's just it. He wasn't invited, but he's there. Jess. In 17 different photos throughout the entire reception. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Jessica spoke, her voice quieter now. Sarah, that's impossible. Your mom checked everyone in at the door. She had that ridiculous clipboard with the seating chart, remember? She was directing people to their tables all night. She was right. My mother had been meticulous about the guest management, something that had embarrassed me at the time, but now seemed crucial. Mom had positioned herself near the entrance with her clipboard and reading glasses, greeting each guest personally and guiding them to their assigned seats. She would have noticed a stranger immediately. Can you send me one of the photos? Jessica asked. I want to see what you're talking about. I hesitated. Something about sharing the images felt wrong, as if I might be spreading whatever strange curse had attached itself to my wedding day. But I needed someone else to see what I was seeing, to confirm I wasn't imagining things. I took a photo of one of the clearer shots, the one during the cake cutting where the man stood behind my cousin David. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with Jessica's response. Sarah, I'm looking at this photo and I don't see anyone unusual. Just you and Michael cutting the cake and all the regular guests behind you. Where exactly am I supposed to be looking? My blood ran cold. I stared at the photo I'd just sent, the same image I'd been examining for hours. The mysterious man was clearly visible, his pale face standing out against the warm lighting of the reception. How could Jessica not see him? Behind David, I said, my voice shaking. The tall, thin man in the dark suit. He's right there. Sarah, honey, there's no one behind David except the wall. Are you feeling okay? Maybe you're just tired from the honeymoon. I ended the call abruptly, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. Either Jessica was lying to me or something was seriously wrong with my perception of reality. I grabbed the album and flipped through it again, and there he was in every photo, as clear as any other guest. Desperate for another opinion, I called my mother. If anyone would remember an uninvited guest, it would be her. Mom, I need you to look at something. Can I come over tonight? Of course, darling. Is everything all right? You sound upset. 20 minutes later, I sat in my childhood living room, the wedding album open between us on the coffee table. My mother adjusted her reading glasses and leaned forward to examine the photos with the same attention to detail she'd brought to planning my wedding. These are beautiful, Sarah. Marcus really outdid himself. Look at this one of you and your father dancing. Oh, it brings tears to my eyes. Mom, look at this photo, I said, turning to the page that had started it all. Do you see the man standing behind Jessica? My mother studied the image carefully, her finger tracing the various guests captured in the frame. She named each person she recognized: Jessica, my college roommate Amy, Michael's cousin Rick. But when her finger reached the space where the mysterious man stood, she paused. That's odd, she said quietly. There's something strange about this photo. My heart leaped. You see him too? See who, dear? Just notice that the lighting seems off in this one spot, almost like there's a shadow where there shouldn't be one. I stared at my mother in disbelief. She was looking directly at the man, her finger hovering inches from his face, but she described only a shadow, the same way Jessica had seen only empty space. Mom, you checked everyone in at the door that night. Do you remember anyone you didn't recognize? Anyone who might have slipped past you? She shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. I had my list and I checked off every single name. Your father and I were very careful about that. We didn't want any wedding crashers or unexpected plus ones disrupting your special day. As I drove home that night, the album secured in the passenger seat, I realized I was facing something beyond logical explanation. The man in the photos was real, at least to me, but to everyone else he was invisible, reduced to shadows and empty spaces. The question that haunted me as I pulled into our driveway was simple and terrifying. If no one else could see him, what did that mean for me? Sleep didn't come that night. I lay beside Michael, listening to his peaceful breathing while my mind raced with impossible possibilities. By 3 a.m. I'd given up on rest and crept downstairs to our home office. The wedding album clutched against my chest like a shield. I spread the photos across Michael's desk under the harsh glow of the desk lamp, examining each image with a magnifying glass I'd found in the junk drawer. In the stark light, the mysterious man seemed even more unsettling. His skin had a waxy, translucent quality that I hadn't noticed before, and his eyes, those hollow, penetrating eyes, seemed to follow me no matter which angle I viewed the photos from. Something nagged at me about his appearance, a familiarity I couldn't quite place. I'd stared at his face for hours now, memorizing every line and hollow, and there was definitely something recognizable about his features. But from where? I opened my laptop and began searching through old family photos stored on our shared drive. Wedding preparations, holiday gatherings, birthday parties, years of digital memories that might hold a clue. As I scrolled through image after image, my eyes began to burn from the screen's glare, but I couldn't stop. Somewhere in our family's documented history, this man existed. I was certain of it. At 4:17 a.m. I found it. The photo was buried in a folder labeled Michael's Family, Old Photos, Images his mother had digitized from her collection of physical albums. It was a black and white photograph, clearly decades old, showing a large family gathering in what appeared to be someone's backyard. Children played in the foreground while adults stood in formal poses behind them. And there, standing slightly apart from the main group, was my mysterious wedding guest. He looked exactly the same. Not similar, identical. Same gaunt face, same hollow eyes, same unsettling stare directed at the camera. The only difference was the clothing. Instead of the dark suit from my wedding, he wore the casual attire typical of the photos era. My hands shook as I zoomed in on his face. The image quality was poor, pixelated from the scanning process, but there was no mistaking him. This was the same man who had appeared in 17 photos at my wedding, captured in what looked like a family photo from the 1950s or 1960s. I scrolled down to check the file's properties. The original photo was labeled Sullivan Family Reunion -1962. Sullivan was Michael's mother's maiden name. With growing dread, I continued searching through the folder. Photo after photo of Michael's extended family, spanning decades of celebrations and gatherings. And in 6 more images, I found him. Always in the background, always slightly apart from the main group, always staring directly at the camera with that same unnerving intensity. A family picnic in 1967, there he was, standing behind the food table. A wedding photo from 1974, visible in the crowd of guests, his face turned toward the photographer. A Christmas gathering from 1981, partially obscured by a decorated tree but unmistakably him. A graduation party from 1989, standing near the garden gate, watching. A birthday celebration from 1995, lurking in the doorway of what appeared to be someone's kitchen. Each photo was separated by years, sometimes decades, but the man never aged. His appearance remained exactly the same in every image. That gaunt face, those hollow eyes, that unnaturally still posture. I printed out each photo, my hands trembling as the images emerged from our old inkjet printer. Laid out side by side, they created a timeline of impossible appearances spanning nearly 60 years. The final image in the sequence was from my wedding album, the man who had somehow attended my reception without being seen by anyone but the camera. As dawn broke through our office window, I heard Michael stirring upstairs. I quickly gathered the printed photos and slipped them into a manila folder, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to voice. This wasn't just about a mysterious wedding guest anymore. This was about something that had been following Michael's family for generations, documenting their celebrations, witnessing their most important moments, and now it had witnessed ours. "Sarah, you're up early," Michael's voice called from the top of the stairs. "Just couldn't sleep," I called back, shoving the folder into the bottom drawer of the desk. "I'll be up in a minute." But as I climbed the stairs to join my husband for breakfast, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. If this entity had been following Michael's family for 60 years, appearing at their weddings and celebrations, what did it want? And why was I the only one who could see it? The folder in the desk drawer felt like it was burning through the wood, demanding attention I wasn't ready to give. Because deep down I knew that researching this mystery further would lead me somewhere I didn't want to go. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. But the need to know was stronger than my fear. That afternoon, while Michael was at work, I would visit his mother. I would ask her about the old family photos, about the reunions and celebrations captured in those digitized memories. I would find out who this man was and why he'd been haunting her family's most precious moments, even if the truth destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married. Margaret Wheeler, Michael's mother, lived in the same Tudor-style house where she'd raised her 3 children. It was a warm, welcoming place filled with decades of family memories. Exactly the kind of home where afternoon tea and difficult conversations seemed equally natural. I'd called ahead with a carefully crafted excuse about creating a surprise photo album for Michael's upcoming birthday, asking if I could look through her old family pictures for inspiration. Margaret had been delighted, immediately pulling out boxes of photo albums that hadn't been touched in years. "These go back to the 1940s, she said, settling into her favorite armchair with a cup of Earl Grey. My mother was meticulous about documenting every family gathering. Sometimes I think she cared more about getting the perfect photo than actually enjoying the moment. I sat across from her, the manila folder hidden in my purse, my heart hammering as she opened the first album. The pages crackled with age as she turned them, revealing black and white snapshots of a family I was only beginning to know, young versions of relatives I'd met at the wedding, children who would grow up to become Michael's aunts and uncles, cousins who would eventually invite us to their own celebrations. "Here's the 1962 reunion I had digitized," Margaret said, turning to a familiar page. "This was at Uncle Frank's house in Connecticut. Such a wonderful day, we hadn't all been together in years. There it was, the same photo I'd found on our computer." My eyes immediately went to the background, to the figure standing apart from the family group. Margaret's finger traced the various relatives, naming each person with the fond precision of someone who'd told these stories countless times. "That's my father, there in the center, God rest his soul. Or my mother beside him in that dress she loved so much. My brother Frank, his wife Louise, and their children, .. She continued the roll call, identifying nearly everyone in the photo. I waited, my breath held, for her to mention the mysterious figure. But she didn't. Her finger moved past him as if he weren't there, just as Jessica had done with the wedding photo. "Mrs. Wheeler," I said carefully, "in this photo there's a man standing behind the children on the left side. Do you know who that might be?" Margaret leaned closer, adjusting her reading glasses. She studied the area where the man stood, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not sure what you mean, dear. I see the children, those are Frank's boys, they must have been 8 and 10 at the time. But I don't see anyone behind them except the oak tree in Frank's backyard, the same pattern." She was looking directly at him, but seeing something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the clearer wedding photos, the one from the cake cutting. Mrs. Wheeler, I found something in our wedding photos that's been troubling me. Could you take a look at this? She took the phone with interest, pleased to see the wedding memories again. Oh, this is lovely. You and Michael look so happy. And there's David and Sarah from my side in double quotes. She paused, her expression changing subtly. That's strange. What's strange? There's something off about this photo. The way the light falls here, she pointed to the exact spot where the mysterious man stood. It creates such an odd shadow. Almost like there should be someone there, but double quotes, she trailed off, handing the phone back to me with a slight shudder. I pressed gently. Mrs. Wheeler, have you ever noticed anything unusual in your family photos? Anyone who appeared in multiple pictures but whom you couldn't quite identify? Her hand stilled on the photo album, and for a moment she looked much older than her 73 years. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, more cautious. Why do you ask such a specific question, Sarah? The directness of her response caught me off guard. There was something in her tone, not confusion, but recognition. As if my question had touched on something she'd been avoiding for years. I've been going through old photos, trying to put together a family tree for Michael's birthday, I lied. There are some images where I can't identify everyone, and I wondered if you'd experienced the same thing. Margaret closed the photo album slowly, her fingers lingering on the cover. When she looked at me, her eyes held a wariness I'd never seen before. Sarah, some family stories are better left alone. Some mysteries don't need solving. But you do know what I'm talking about, I pressed. You've seen him too, haven't you? She was quiet for so long that I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for decades. My grandmother called him the witness. She said he'd been appearing in our family photos for as long as anyone could remember. Always at the important moments, weddings, funerals, christenings, reunions. Never interacting with anyone, never speaking, just watching. My blood ran cold. Your grandmother could see him. Only in photographs, never in person. Just like she stopped herself, pressing her lips together as if she'd said too much. Just like what? Margaret stood up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked her garden. Her shoulders were tense, her voice strained when she continued. Just like me. I've been seeing him in our family photos for 50 years, Sarah. Always in the background, always watching. I learned to stop mentioning it because no one else could see him. They'd look at the same photo and see empty space or shadows or tricks of light. She turned back to face me, and I could see the relief in her eyes at finally sharing this burden with someone who would understand. When Michael was born, I started checking every photo before I showed it to anyone. I'd look for him first, and if he was there, I'd crop him out or find an excuse not to share that particular image. I couldn't bear the thought of people thinking I was losing my mind. So he's been following your family for generations? My grandmother's journals mention him appearing in daguerreotypes from the 1800s. Same face, same presence, always watching our most important moments. She believed he was some kind of guardian spirit, keeping watch over the family bloodline. I thought of the 17 photos from my wedding, of that hollow stare that seemed to look beyond the camera into something else entirely. But why can only some people see him? And why is he in my wedding photos now? Margaret's expression softened with something that looked like pity. Oh, Sarah, don't you understand? He doesn't follow the family. He follows the women who marry into it. The ones who carry the future of the bloodline. The room seemed to spin around me. What are you saying? My grandmother saw him. I see him. And now, she gestured toward my purse, where I'd hidden the folder of printed photos. Now you see him too. Welcome to the family, dear. You're one of us now. That night I sat in our bedroom, staring at my reflection in the antique mirror that had belonged to Michael's grandmother. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. He follows the women who marry into the family. The implication was terrifying. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than even Margaret understood. Michael was in the shower, humming the same song we'd danced to at our wedding. The sound should have been comforting, but instead it filled me with dread. How could I tell him that our wedding had been witnessed by something that had been haunting his family for over a century? How could I explain that I was now part of some supernatural legacy I'd never asked for? I pulled out the folder of photos again, spreading them across our bedspread in chronological order. The progression was undeniable, from the 1940s family gathering to my wedding day, the same face appearing at the most significant moments of the Wheeler family history. But as I studied the images more carefully, I noticed something Margaret hadn't mentioned. The women. In each photo, the mysterious figure wasn't just randomly positioned. He was always standing closest to the women who had married into the family. In the 1962 reunion, he stood behind Louise, Frank's wife. In the 1974 wedding photo, he was near the bride. presumably another Wheeler family marriage. The pattern continued through the decades, with the entity positioning himself near the women who carried the family forward. And in my wedding photos, he was always in my vicinity. Never Michael's, never the other guests. Mine. But why? What was so special about the women who married Wheeler men, and what did this presence want from us? I heard Michael turn off the shower and quickly gathered the photos. But as I slipped them back into the folder, one image caught my attention, something I'd missed in my previous examinations. In the 1995 birthday photo, the one where the figure stood in a kitchen doorway, there was another detail that made my blood run cold. The woman closest to him, a young woman in her 30s with dark hair and a bright smile, looked familiar. Very familiar. I studied her face more closely, and recognition hit me like a physical blow. It was Michael's first wife, Rebecca. Michael had been married before, briefly, in his early 30s. The marriage had lasted only 2 years, ending in what he described as an amicable divorce due to incompatible life goals. He rarely talked about Rebecca, and I'd never pushed for details, respecting his privacy about a relationship that had ended long before we met. But here she was in a Wheeler family photo from 1995, standing close to the mysterious figure at what appeared to be someone's birthday celebration. She must have been part of the family for a short time, just as I was now. Sarah, everything okay in there? Michael called from the bathroom. Fine, I managed, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. I needed to know more about Rebecca. If the entity followed the women who married into the Wheeler family, what had happened to Michael's first wife? Why had their marriage really ended? And was she able to see him too? The next morning, while Michael was at work, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I searched for Rebecca Wheeler on social media. It felt like a violation of trust, but I needed answers that Michael couldn't or wouldn't provide. I found her, icily enough. Rebecca Martinez now. She'd returned to her maiden name after the divorce. She lived in Portland, Oregon, where she worked as a freelance graphic designer. Her profiles showed a life rebuilt after her marriage to Michael, filled with hiking adventures, artistic projects, and a tight-knit group of friends who regularly appeared in her posts. But what struck me most was what wasn't there. Unlike most people her age, Rebecca's social media presence only went back 5 years. No photos from her 30s, no throwback posts from her marriage years, no nostalgic references to her past. It was as if she'd deliberately erased an entire decade of her life. I found her email address through her professional website and spent an hour crafting a message that wouldn't sound completely insane. Hi, Rebecca. You don't know me, but I'm married to Michael Wheeler. I'm working on a family history project and found some old photos that include you from the mid-90s. I was hoping you might be able to help identify some of the people in the images. Would you be willing to take a look? I attached the 1995 birthday photo, carefully cropped to exclude the mysterious figure. If Rebecca could see him like Margaret and I could, she'd notice his absence immediately. Her response came within 3 hours, and it was nothing like I'd expected. Sarah, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I made it very clear when I divorced Michael that I never wanted any contact with his family again. Please don't email me again, and please don't send me any more photos from that house. Some things are better left buried. The vehemence of her response was startling. This wasn't someone who'd had an amicable divorce due to incompatible life goals. This was someone who'd fled from something and never looked back. I replied immediately, Rebecca, I'm not playing any games. I think you and I might have experienced something similar. Something involving old family photos. If you know what I'm talking about, please call me. I need help. This time her response came within minutes. Just a phone number and 4 words. Call me right now. My hands shook as I dialed. Rebecca answered on the first ring, and her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. How long have you been seeing him? She asked without preamble. 3 days, I whispered. Since I got our wedding album back from the photographer. Wedding album? Her laugh was bitter. Of course. He always shows up for the weddings. Sarah, you need to listen to me very carefully. That thing in the photos, he's not a guardian spirit or a family protector or whatever story Margaret told you. He's something else entirely, something that feeds on the women in that family. Feeds on us? What do you mean? I mean, he watches until he's ready to take what he wants. And what he wants is always the same: our lives, our energy, our very essence. I barely escaped with my sanity intact. The line went quiet except for the sound of both of us breathing heavily. Finally, I found my voice. Rebecca, what really happened to your marriage? The same thing that's going to happen to yours if you don't get out now. He drove me to the edge of madness, appearing in every photo, every reflection, every moment of happiness, until I couldn't trust my own perception of reality. Michael couldn't see him, just like your husband can't see him now. The isolation nearly destroyed me. But you got away. You survived. I ran, Sarah. I left everything. My marriage, my home, my life, and I ran as far as I could. And even then, it took years before he stopped appearing in mirrors and windows and photographs. Years of therapy and medication and slowly rebuilding my sense of reality. I thought of the mysterious figure's hollow stare, the way he seemed to look beyond the camera into something deeper. What does he want from us? Rebecca's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He wants to step out of the photographs, Sarah. He wants to become real again. And he can only do that by taking the life force of a Wheeler woman who can see him. The room suddenly felt ice cold, and I found myself looking around nervously, checking corners and shadows for any sign of movement. How do you know all this? Because I wasn't the first, Sarah. There were others before me, and the family has records going back generations. Women who married into the Wheeler line and then disappeared. Not physically, but mentally. They'd become withdrawn, paranoid, speaking about seeing things that weren't there. Most of them ended up in institutions. My blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying that Michael's family has a very convenient way of explaining away inconvenient wives. It's mental illness runs in families, they say. The stress of marriage, the pressure of fitting in, it's all very tragic, but understandable when a new bride starts seeing things. The phone felt heavy in my hand as the implications sank in. But Margaret sees him too. She told me she's been seeing him for 50 years. Margaret survived because she learned to keep quiet about it. She crops him out of photos. She doesn't talk about what she sees. She plays the perfect family matriarch. But you've already made the mistake of asking questions, of showing the photos to others. How long before Michael starts wondering about your mental state? I thought of Jessica's confusion when she couldn't see the man in the wedding photo, of my mother describing only shadows where I saw a clear figure. How long before the people I loved started questioning my sanity? There has to be another way, I said desperately. Some way to stop this without running away from my life. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of terrible knowledge. There is one other option, Sarah, but it's worse than running. Much worse. The silence on the phone stretched between us like a chasm, and I could feel Rebecca wrestling with whether to tell me something that might destroy whatever hope I had left. What option? I whispered, though part of me dreaded the answer. You give him what he wants, Rebecca said finally. You let him step out of the photographs. I don't understand. The entity, whatever he is. He's been trapped between dimensions for over a century, existing only in captured moments. He can see our world, interact with it through photographs, but he can't fully enter it, not without help. I walked to our bedroom window, staring out at the quiet suburban street where normal people lived normal lives, unaware that their neighbor was having a conversation about dimensional entities and supernatural possession. Help how? There's a ritual. Margaret knows about it. Her grandmother's journals contain detailed instructions. If a Wheeler woman willingly allows the entity to merge with her consciousness during a moment of intense emotional significance, he can use her life force to manifest physically in our world. The words hit me like physical blows. You mean possession? Not exactly. More like ... replacement. The woman's consciousness gets pushed aside and he takes control of her body permanently. To everyone else, it would look like she'd simply changed. New interests. Different personality, maybe some memory issues from the trauma of whatever triggered the transformation. But inside, she'd be gone, and he'd be free to live the life he's been watching for so long. I sank onto our bed, my legs unable to support me any longer. That's not an option, Rebecca. That's suicide. I know. But some of the women in the family records, they chose it. The constant watching, the isolation, the slow descent into what everyone else perceived as madness, they couldn't take it anymore. They performed the ritual during family gatherings, usually weddings or funerals, when emotions were running high and the veil between worlds was thinnest. And their families never knew? How could they? One day they had a wife or a daughter who claimed to see impossible things, and the next day they had a woman who seemed more stable, more grounded, but somehow different. Everyone was relieved that the episode had passed. No one looked too closely at the changes. I thought of the women in the old photographs, the ones who'd married into the Wheeler family and then seemed to fade from the family narrative. How many of them had made this terrible choice? But you ran instead, I said. You found another way. I tried to run. But Sarah, you need to understand, he doesn't just follow you physically. Once you can see him, once that connection is established, he becomes part of your reality. Even 3,000 miles away in Portland, I still see him sometimes. In windows, in mirrors, in photographs. He's weaker here, less substantial, but he's not gone. The hopelessness in her voice was crushing. If escape wasn't really escape, and the alternative was giving up my very existence, what choice did I have? There has to be something else, I said desperately. Some way to break the connection, to sever the link between him and the family. I spent 5 years researching that possibility, Rebecca replied. I consulted psychics, paranormal investigators, historians, theologians, anyone who might have answers. The closest thing I found to hope was a theory that the entity is somehow anchored to a physical object, something that belonged to him when he was alive. You think he was human once? The oldest family record suggests he was a photographer himself, sometime in the late 1800s, obsessed with capturing the perfect family portrait, with documenting every significant moment. When he died, his spirit somehow became bound to the very thing he'd devoted his life to, the preservation of family memories through photographs. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered Marcus's words about how the man seemed to know exactly where the camera would be positioned for each shot. A photographer would have that instinctual understanding of angles and lighting, of how to position himself to be perfectly framed in every image. So if we could find this object, this anchor, we could potentially break his connection to the family. But, Sarah, I looked everywhere. I searched through every antique shop, every estate sale, every family storage area I could access. If there's a physical anchor, it's either been destroyed over the decades or it's hidden somewhere no one thinks to look. I heard Michael's car pulling into the driveway and quickly moved away from the window. He couldn't see me like this, panicked, desperate, on the phone with his ex-wife discussing supernatural entities and possession rituals. Rebecca, I need more time to think about this. You don't have much time, she warned. The connection strengthens with exposure. The more you see him, the more real he becomes to you. The easier it will be for him to make the transition. I lasted 2 years, but I was fighting it every day. And I was stronger than I realized. Most women don't last nearly that long. What do you mean? Look up Helen Wheeler, Michael's great-aunt. She married into the family in 1978, started talking about seeing strange figures in photographs within a month of her wedding. 6 months later, she was institutionalized for what the family called a complete psychotic break. She died in that institution 15 years later. But according to the nurses' reports I managed to track down, she spent her final years insisting that someone else was living in her body. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. The pattern was clear now. Women who could see the entity either fled like Rebecca, chose the ritual like the others, or were slowly driven insane by the isolation and gaslighting that came with being the only one who could perceive the truth. Sarah, are you still there? I'm here, I managed. Michael just got home. I have to go. Wait, Rebecca said urgently. One more thing. If you decide to stay and fight this, don't trust Margaret completely. She survived by making accommodations with that thing, by finding a way to coexist with it. That doesn't make her your ally, it makes her someone who's learned to live with a monster. Be very careful who you trust in that family. The line went dead just as Michael's key turned in the front door lock. I quickly hid the folder of photographs and tried to compose my face into something resembling normalcy. Hey, beautiful, Michael called from downstairs. How was your day? Fine, I called back, my voice sounding strange and hollow to my own ears. Just fine. But as I listened to my husband moving around our home, preparing for another normal evening in our normal life, I knew that nothing would ever be fine again. I had a choice to make, and all of my options led to losing everything I'd thought I wanted. The only question now was whether I'd lose it by running away, by giving up my very existence, or by slowly descending into a madness that no one else would be able to understand. Michael fell asleep easily that night, his breathing settling into the steady rhythm I'd grown to love during our 2 years together. But I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling and fighting the urge to check every shadow in our bedroom for signs of movement. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. when I finally gave up on sleep. I slipped out of bed carefully, grabbing my robe and the folder of photographs from where I'd hidden them in the closet. The house was tomb quiet as I made my way downstairs to the kitchen, where I spread the photos across the table under the soft light of the pendant lamp. 17 wedding photos. 6 family photographs spanning 60 years, all featuring the same impossible figure who seemed to exist only for the camera's eye. But as I studied them in the pre-dawn silence, something new caught my attention. In several of the images, the mysterious man's hollow gaze wasn't directed at the camera as I'd initially thought. He was looking slightly to the right of the lens, as if focusing on something just beyond the photographer's shoulder, or someone. I gathered the photos and walked to the hallway mirror, the same antique piece that had belonged to Michael's grandmother. In the dim light, my reflection looked pale and drawn, haunted by the knowledge I now carried. But as I held up one of the wedding photos, positioning it so I could see both the image and my reflection simultaneously, my blood turned to ice. There, in the mirror behind my reflected image, stood the figure from the photographs. He wasn't solid like a normal reflection would be, more like a shadow made of smoke and moonlight, but his face was clearly visible, and those hollow eyes that I'd studied for hours were now looking directly at me. Not at a camera, not at some point beyond my shoulder, but straight into my eyes through the mirror's surface. The photos slipped from my trembling hands, clattering to the floor as I spun around to face the space behind me. Nothing. The hallway was empty, filled only with the familiar shapes of our furniture and family portraits. But when I turned back to the mirror, he was still there. Closer now, as if he'd stepped forward while my back was turned. One translucent hand was raised, palm pressed against what appeared to be the inside surface of the mirror, like someone trapped behind glass trying to break through. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Let me out." I stumbled backward, knocking into the small table where we kept our mail and keys. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot, and I heard Michael stirring upstairs. "Sarah? Everything okay down there?" The figure in the mirror tilted his head at the sound of Michael's voice, and for the first time his expression changed. The hollow stare was replaced by something that looked almost like ... hunger. "Fine," I called back, my voice cracking. "Just getting some water." When I looked at the mirror again, it showed only my own reflection, pale and terrified in the dim light. But I could feel him watching me from somewhere just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for another opportunity to push through whatever barrier separated his world from mine. I gathered the scattered photos with shaking hands and retreated to the living room, where I huddled on the couch with every light switched on. The normalcy of our home, Michael's books scattered on the coffee table, the throw pillows I'd carefully arranged, the wedding gifts still finding their permanent places, felt like a mockery now. How had I lived here for 2 years without knowing that something had been watching us, waiting for the right moment to make contact? How many times had I passed that mirror without realizing that something was looking back? My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The number was unfamiliar, but the message made my blood run cold. "He's getting stronger. The mirror contact means you're running out of time. We need to meet in person. There's something I couldn't tell you over the phone." "Rebecca," I typed back quickly. "How did you get this number?" I never stopped watching Michael's family, Sarah. I've been monitoring social media, public records, anything that might tell me when he found someone new to torment. I knew about your wedding before it happened. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca hadn't escaped at all. She'd been living in a self-imposed exile, constantly vigilant for signs that the entity had found a new target. Her freedom was an illusion, her life defined by the very thing she'd tried to leave behind. "What couldn't you tell me over the phone?" "Not over text either, too risky. Can you get away tomorrow?" "Meet me halfway, somewhere public but private. I have something to show you, something that might change everything." I thought of Michael sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that his wife was planning to meet his ex-wife to discuss supernatural entities and family curses. The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. Where and when? Riverside Park in Springfield, 2 p.m. There's a bench near the old stone bridge. I'll be waiting there. "And Sarah? Bring the wedding photos. All of them. What I have to show you will only make sense if you can see both pieces of the puzzle." I spent the remaining hours until dawn researching everything I could find about the Wheeler family history. Obituaries, marriage records, census data, anything that might provide clues about the entity's origins or identity. By the time Michael woke up, I had pages of notes and a growing suspicion that the official family narrative had deliberately obscured certain inconvenient truths. "You're up early again," Michael said, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by printouts and handwritten notes. "This family history project is really consuming you, isn't it?" The concern in his voice was genuine. But I detected something else underneath it, a wariness that made me wonder how much he really knew about his family's secrets. "I find genealogy fascinating," I said carefully. "There are so many stories hidden in old records." "Just don't get too obsessed with the past," he said, kissing the top of my head. "We've got our own future to build." But as he left for work, whistling that same wedding song, I couldn't shake the feeling that our future was already being written by forces beyond our control. The entity in the photographs had been patient for over a century, waiting for the right opportunity to step out of the shadows and claim what he believed was his. And tonight I was beginning to understand that what he wanted wasn't just my life, it was the life I was building with Michael, the family we might create, the legacy that would carry the Wheeler name into the next generation. By 1 p.m. I was driving toward Springfield with the wedding album on the passenger seat and a growing certainty that whatever Rebecca had to show me would force me to make the most important choice of my life. Behind me in the rearview mirror, I could swear I saw a familiar shadow in the back seat, growing more solid with each passing mile. The closer I got to the meeting point, the more real he became. And the more real he became, the less certain I was that I would survive whatever revelation awaited me at that park bench. Some doors, once opened, change everything. And I was about to walk through one that would determine whether I kept my life, my sanity, or my soul, because I was beginning to understand that I might not be able to keep all three. The photographs never lie. They capture moments of truth that our eyes might miss, preserve evidence of things that shouldn't exist. But sometimes the truth they reveal is more terrifying than any fiction we could imagine. What would you do if you found something in your wedding photos that shouldn't have been there? Something that only you could see? Tell me in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful moments in our lives are being watched by things we never invited to the celebration. Subscribe if you dare to hear more stories like this one, because the truth is often stranger and more frightening than anything we could make up. And remember, the next time you look through old family photos, pay attention to the backgrounds, the shadows, the faces that seem to watch you back, because you never know who or what might be watching you in return.